Captain Sarah "Ghost" Martinez gripped the control stick of her F-22 Raptor as she descended through the morning clouds over Elmendorf Air Force Base, Alaska. The sleek fighter jet responded to her touch like a living thing, its twin engines humming with barely contained power. Below her, the runway stretched out like a gray ribbon against the snow-covered landscape. This landing would mark the end of another perfect training mission, but Sarah knew that perfection wasn't enough for some people. As her landing gear touched down with a gentle bump, Sarah could already see the cluster of officers waiting near the hangar. Among them stood Colonel Marcus Webb, the wing commander whose disapproval seemed to radiate even from this distance. Webb had made his feelings about female F-22 pilots crystal clear during her first week at the base. According to him, women lacked the physical strength and mental toughness required for stealth operations behind enemy lines. Sarah taxied her aircraft toward the hangar, following the ground cruise signals. The F-22 was a marvel of engineering, invisible to most radar systems and capable of supersonic flight without afterburners. It represented the pinnacle of American air superiority, and Sarah had trained for 5 years to earn her place in its cockpit. Yet despite her flawless record and top scores in every assessment, she found herself constantly fighting to prove she belonged here. The canopy hissed open as Sarah shut down the engines. The familiar smell of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid filled her nostrils as she began her post-flight checklist. Every switch, every gauge, every system had to be properly secured before she could climb out. This attention to detail had earned her the nickname Ghost during flight school, not just for her ability to appear and disappear without warning, but for her meticulous preparation that left no trace of error. "Outstanding flight profile, Captain Martinez," called out Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, her crew chief, as he positioned the ladder against her aircraft. Rodriguez was one of the few people on base who judged Sarah purely on her abilities. In his 20 years of military service, he had worked with hundreds of pilots, and he knew talent when he saw it. Sarah climbed down from the cockpit, her flight suit still bearing traces of perspiration from the intense training mission. She had just completed a mock infiltration of heavily defended airspace, simulating a deep strike mission behind enemy lines. Her performance had been flawless, but she knew that Colonel Webb would find something to criticize. He always did. "Captain Martinez," Webb's voice cut through the morning air as he approached with his entourage of junior officers. The colonel was a stocky man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that seemed perpetually skeptical. "I've reviewed your mission data from today's exercise." Sarah snapped to attention, knowing that Webb was about to deliver another lecture about her supposed inadequacies. "Yes, sir. All mission objectives were completed successfully. Your flight path deviated from the prescribed route by 12 degrees during the ingress phase," Webb said, consulting his tablet. "In a real combat situation, that kind of improvisation could compromise the entire mission." "Sir, the deviation was necessary to avoid simulated surface-to-air missile sites that weren't in the original briefing," Sarah replied calmly. "My route actually improved mission success probability by 37% according to the computer analysis." Webb's jaw tightened. "The mission plan exists for a reason, Captain. Following orders isn't a suggestion, it's a requirement. Perhaps that's something they didn't emphasize enough in your training." The implication hung in the air like exhaust fumes. Webb was suggesting that female pilots received somehow easier training, that they weren't held to the same standards as their male counterparts. Sarah had heard these insinuations countless times, and each one stung more than she cared to admit. "I understand the importance of following orders, sir," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. "However, the mission brief specifically stated that pilots should adapt to changing tactical situations. The SAM sites represented exactly that kind of changing situation." Major Tom "Hawk" Patterson, Sarah's flight leader, stepped forward. Patterson was a 15-year veteran with multiple combat deployments and a reputation for fairness. "Colonel, Captain Martinez's adaptation was textbook perfect. She identified the threat, calculated an alternative approach, and executed flawlessly. That's exactly the kind of thinking we want in stealth operations." Webb's expression darkened as he turned to Patterson. "Major, I appreciate your input, but I'm evaluating Captain Martinez's performance, not seeking a consensus." The tension between the two men was palpable. Patterson had served under Webb before and knew the colonel's prejudices all too well. Despite Webb's impressive service record, his attitude toward female combat pilots remained stuck in the past. The Air Force had officially opened all combat roles to women years ago, but changing policies was easier than changing minds. "Sir, with respect," Patterson continued, "Captain Martinez has the highest training scores in the squadron. Her situational awareness and tactical decision-making are exceptional. If we're looking for pilots to handle sensitive stealth operations, she should be at the top of the list." "Should be," Webb repeated slowly. "Major Patterson, stealth operations require more than just flying ability. They require physical endurance, mental resilience, and the ability to operate independently behind enemy lines for extended periods. These are not qualities that can be measured in a training environment." Sarah felt her temper beginning to rise, but she forced herself to remain calm. Getting angry would only confirm Webb's preconceptions about emotional instability. Instead, she focused on her breathing, a technique she had learned during survival training. Stay cool, stay professional, prove them wrong through performance. "Colonel Webb," Sarah said carefully, "I understand your concerns about operational readiness. Perhaps we could arrange a comprehensive evaluation that would address these questions definitively." Webb studied her for a long moment, as if trying to detect some sign of weakness. "What kind of evaluation did you have in mind, Captain?" "A full-scale simulation exercise," Sarah replied. "Deep penetration mission into hostile territory, extended duration, complete operational autonomy. If I fail to meet any performance standard, I'll accept reassignment to non-combat duties." The hangar fell silent except for the distant sound of aircraft engines. Webb's junior officers exchanged glances, surprised by Sarah's bold proposal. Even Patterson looked concerned about the risks his pilot was taking. A failed evaluation at this level could end her career in fighter aircraft permanently. "Interesting proposition," Webb said slowly. "However, such an exercise would require approval from wing headquarters. It would also need to simulate realistic combat conditions, which means real risks." "I understand the stakes, sir," Sarah replied. "I'm confident in my abilities." Webb nodded slowly, a calculating expression crossing his face. "Very well, Captain Martinez. I'll discuss your request with the appropriate authorities. If approved, this evaluation will be conducted under full combat protocols. There won't be any allowances for gender differences or special accommodations." "I wouldn't want any, sir." As Webb and his group walked away, Patterson moved closer to Sarah. "Ghost, are you sure about this? Webb's been looking for an excuse to ground female pilots since the integration began. If he designs this evaluation, he's going to make it nearly impossible to pass." Sarah watched Webb's retreating figure disappear into the hangar's shadows. "Tom, I've been flying perfect missions for 6 months, and it hasn't changed his mind. Maybe it's time to stop trying to convince him gradually and prove my point definitively." "Or give him the ammunition he needs to end your career," Patterson warned. "There are other ways to handle this situation. We could go through channels, file a formal complaint about discriminatory treatment." Sarah shook her head. "That would just confirm his belief that women need special protection to succeed. No, if I'm going to prove I belong here, it has to be on his terms, by his standards. When I pass his evaluation, there won't be any room for doubt." Rodriguez, who had been quietly performing his post-flight inspection, looked up from his checklist. "Captain, if you don't mind me saying so, you're taking a hell of a risk. Colonel Webb's got friends in high places. Even if you perform perfectly, he might find ways to declare the evaluation inconclusive." "Maybe," Sarah admitted, "but I can't build my career around what Webb might or might not do. I can only control my own performance, and my performance has always spoken for itself." The three of them stood in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the controlled chaos of a busy flight line. Aircraft taxied past them while ground crews scrambled to service returning jets. The smell of jet fuel mixed with the crisp Alaskan air created a uniquely military atmosphere that Sarah had grown to love. "There's something else to consider," Patterson said quietly. "If Webb approves this evaluation, word's going to spread throughout the fighter community. Success could help other female pilots, but failure could set back integration efforts for years," Sarah finished. "I know, that's why I can't fail." As they walked toward the squadron building, Sarah reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. She had always known that being among the first women in F-22s would mean carrying extra scrutiny, extra pressure. Every mistake would be magnified, every success questioned. But she had also known that someone had to be first, someone had to prove it could be done. Growing up in Texas, Sarah had watched military aircraft training overhead and dreamed of joining their ranks. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, had encouraged her ambitions even when others suggested she choose a more traditional career path. "Mija," he would say, "never let anyone else's limitations become your ceiling." During college, Sarah had joined the Reserve Officer Training Corps despite facing skepticism from some instructors. She excelled in every challenge they presented, from physical fitness to academic performance. When she graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering, she was selected for undergraduate pilot training with the highest possible recommendations. Flight school had brought new challenges and new doubters. Some of her male classmates openly questioned whether women belonged in combat aircraft. Others were supportive, but seemed to expect her to fail at any moment. Sarah responded by outworking everyone, spending extra hours in the simulator, studying aircraft systems until she knew them better than the maintenance manuals. Her selection for F-22 training had been based purely on merit, her instructors assured her. The Raptor program needed the best pilots available, regardless of gender. But that selection had also placed her under a microscope, unlike anything she had experienced before. Every flight was evaluated, every decision analyzed, every interaction scrutinized for signs of weakness. Now, 6 months into her operational tour, Sarah had compiled a perfect record. 0 accidents, 0 incidents, 0 mission failures. Her tactical knowledge was encyclopedic, her flying skills exceptional. Yet still she faced questions about her suitability for the mission. Colonel Webb's evaluation might finally put those questions to rest, or it might end her F-22 career forever. Inside the squadron building, Sarah made her way to the intelligence section for her mission debrief. The walls were lined with photographs of previous squadron commanders and aircraft, a visual history of American air superiority. Someday, she hoped, other young women would see her photograph on these walls and know that the path was possible. Lieutenant Colonel Janet Pierce, the squadron intelligence officer, looked up as Sarah entered the briefing room. Pierce was one of the few senior female officers on base, having carved out a successful career in intelligence analysis. She had been a mentor and advocate for Sarah since her arrival at Elmendorf. "Outstanding mission today, Ghost," Pierce said, using Sarah's call sign with obvious pride. "Your tactical decisions were textbook perfect. That route deviation probably saved your virtual life 3 times over." "Colonel Webb didn't seem impressed," Sarah replied, settling into her chair for the debrief. Pierce's expression darkened. "Marcus Webb is fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's prejudices. Don't let his narrow thinking define your potential." "Actually," Sarah said slowly, "I might have given him the opportunity to do exactly that." She explained her proposal for a comprehensive evaluation, watching Pierce's expression grow increasingly concerned. When Sarah finished, the intelligence officer leaned back in her chair and whistled softly. "Sarah, you're putting your entire career on the line based on one man's prejudices. That's either very brave or very foolish, and I'm not sure which." "Maybe both," Sarah admitted. "But I'm tired of proving myself incrementally only to have the goalposts moved again. If Webb wants to test my limits, let's find out what those limits actually are." Pierce studied her for a long moment. "If this evaluation gets approved, you're going to need every advantage you can get. Webb will design it to push you beyond normal operational parameters. We need to start preparing now." The two women spent the next hour reviewing potential mission scenarios that might be included in Webb's evaluation. Deep strike missions into heavily defended territory, extended duration flights requiring aerial refueling, complex electronic warfare environments designed to degrade communications and navigation systems. Each scenario presented unique challenges that would test different aspects of pilot capability. As the afternoon wore on, word of Sarah's challenge to Webb began spreading through the base. By dinner time, the entire squadron was buzzing with rumors and speculation. Some pilots expressed admiration for her boldness, others concern for her judgment. Everyone agreed that the stakes couldn't be higher. Major Patterson found Sarah in the officers' club that evening, sitting alone at a corner table with a cup of coffee and a stack of technical manuals. She was reviewing F-22 emergency procedures, preparing for whatever challenges Webb might devise. "Mind if I join you?" Patterson asked, settling into the opposite chair without waiting for an answer. "I've been thinking about our conversation this afternoon." Sarah looked up from her manual. having second thoughts about supporting my proposal. No, Patterson said firmly. Having thoughts about how to make sure you succeed. If Webb approves this evaluation, he's going to try to break you. We need to make sure you're unbreakable. For the next 2 hours, Patterson shared insights from his combat experience, describing the psychological pressures of operating alone behind enemy lines. He talked about the isolation, the constant threat awareness, the split-second decisions that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The hardest part isn't the flying, Patterson explained. It's maintaining focus and confidence when everything around you is trying to kill you and you have no backup. Webb's going to try to simulate that pressure artificially. Sarah nodded, absorbing every word. She had trained extensively in high-stress environments, but Patterson's combat experience provided perspectives that no simulation could replicate. His willingness to share that knowledge represented more than professional courtesy. It was a vote of confidence in her abilities. As the evening wound down, Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension about what lay ahead. Webb's evaluation would either vindicate her belief in her own capabilities or end her F-22 career permanently. There would be no middle ground, no partial credit for effort. Walking back to her quarters through the crisp Alaskan night, Sarah looked up at the stars visible above the base's lights. Somewhere up there, satellites tracked aircraft movements around the globe, while early warning radars searched for potential threats to American airspace. The F-22 was designed to operate in that environment, invisible to enemy sensors while maintaining complete situational awareness of the battle space below. Soon, Sarah hoped, she would have the chance to prove that she could operate in that environment as effectively as any pilot in the Air Force. Colonel Webb's evaluation would be the ultimate test of everything she had trained for, everything she believed about her own capabilities. Success would open doors not just for her, but for every female pilot who followed in her footsteps. Failure was not an option she allowed herself to consider. 3 weeks after Sarah's challenge to Colonel Webb, the approval came through channels marked with the highest classification levels. The evaluation would take place during Operation Arctic Thunder, a massive joint training exercise designed to test American air defenses against simulated enemy infiltration. Sarah's mission would be embedded within this larger exercise, making her test as realistic as possible. The briefing room at Elmendorf was packed with more senior officers than Sarah had ever seen in one place. Representatives from Air Combat Command, Pacific Air Forces, and even the Pentagon had flown in to observe this unprecedented evaluation. The presence of so many high-ranking officials made clear that Sarah's performance would have implications far beyond her individual career. General Patricia Hayes, a 3-star officer from Air Combat Command headquarters, led the briefing. Hayes was a legend in the fighter community, having commanded combat operations in 3 different conflicts. She was also the highest-ranking female officer in the Air Force's combat aviation community, making her presence at Sarah's evaluation particularly significant. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Hayes began, "this evaluation represents more than just one pilot's capabilities. The results will inform policy decisions about female integration in stealth operations for years to come. We owe it to Captain Martinez and to the Air Force to conduct this assessment with complete objectivity and fairness." Colonel Webb sat in the front row, his expression unreadable. He had spent the past 3 weeks designing an evaluation that would push Sarah beyond normal operational limits while remaining technically within safety parameters. The mission profile he had created was complex enough to challenge even the most experienced pilots, let alone someone with Sarah's limited operational experience. "The mission scenario," Webb announced as he took the podium, "involves deep penetration of hostile airspace to conduct intelligence gathering and precision strikes against high-value targets. Captain Martinez will operate autonomously for 72 hours, with minimal communication and no tactical support from friendly forces." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as Webb outlined the details. The mission would begin with a night infiltration through heavily defended airspace, simulated by some of the military's most advanced radar systems and electronic warfare equipment. She would then proceed to 3 separate target areas, each presenting unique challenges designed to test different aspects of stealth operations. The first target was a simulated command and control facility protected by integrated air defense systems. Sarah would need to penetrate multiple layers of radar coverage, identify and mark the target for precision weapons, and extract without detection. The second target required low-altitude reconnaissance of a mobile missile battery, demanding precise navigation and extended loitering in hostile territory. The final target presented the greatest challenge, a simulated airfield where enemy aircraft were being prepared for launch. Sarah would need to coordinate with Special Operations Forces on the ground to identify specific aircraft, then conduct precision strikes to neutralize the threat while avoiding collateral damage to nearby civilian structures. Each phase of this mission, Webb continued, will be monitored by independent observers and evaluated against established performance standards. Captain Martinez will have access to standard F22 systems and weapons, but no special accommodations or modified procedures will be authorized. General Hayes stood to address the assembled officers. I want to emphasize that this evaluation will be conducted exactly as it would be for any pilot, regardless of gender. Captain Martinez requested to be judged by the same standards applied to her male colleagues, and that's exactly what will happen. After the briefing, Sarah was escorted to a secure preparation area where she would spend the next 24 hours studying target materials and planning her approach. The walls were covered with satellite imagery, intelligence reports, and technical data about the simulated threats she would face. Every detail had been designed to replicate real-world conditions as closely as possible. Major Patterson joined her in the preparation room, officially serving as her mission planning advisor. Together, they analyzed the target areas, studying terrain features, weather patterns, and potential approach routes. The mission would require Sarah to fly over 800 miles of hostile territory, much of it at extremely low altitude to avoid radar detection. The timing on this is brutal, Patterson observed, pointing to the mission timeline. You'll need to hit all 3 targets within a 6-hour window, which means no margin for error or course corrections. Sarah nodded, running calculations in her head. The F-22's internal fuel capacity would be stretched to its limits, especially if she needed to use afterburners for evasive maneuvers. She would have access to aerial refueling, but only at predetermined locations that might not align with her tactical requirements. "What's your assessment of Webb's real intentions?" Sarah asked quietly, knowing that the preparation room was probably monitored. Patterson hesitated before answering. "Honestly, I think he's designed this to be impossible. Not just difficult or challenging, but actually impossible for any pilot to complete successfully. Then he can claim that the failure proves his point about women in combat." "That's what I figured," Sarah said, "which means I need to approach this differently than he expects." She spent the rest of the evening studying not just the mission requirements, but Webb's own flying background and tactical preferences. If he had designed this evaluation based on his own biases and experiences, understanding those biases might reveal weaknesses in his planning. Webb had flown F-15 Eagles during the Gulf War, an era when American air superiority was achieved through overwhelming firepower and numerical advantage. His approach to mission planning reflected that background, emphasizing direct routes and decisive engagement with enemy forces. The F-22, however, was designed for a different kind of warfare, one that prioritized stealth and precision over brute force. That night, Sarah dreamed of flying through endless clouds, her aircraft invisible to the radar systems searching for her below. In her dream, she moved like a ghost through enemy territory, completing her mission without leaving any trace of her presence. She woke before dawn with a crystal-clear understanding of how to approach Webb's evaluation. The pre-mission briefing took place at 500 hours, with Sarah facing a panel of evaluators that included representatives from multiple commands. Each evaluator would monitor different aspects of her performance, from basic flying skills to tactical decision-making under pressure. Their collective assessment would determine not just her career trajectory, but potentially the future of women in stealth operations. "Captain Martinez," General Hayes said as the briefing concluded, "do you have any final questions about the mission parameters or evaluation criteria?" Sarah stood at attention, her flight suit crisp and her bearing confident despite the enormous pressure she faced. "No questions, ma'am. I understand the mission requirements and accept the evaluation standards as briefed." "Very well, good luck, Captain." Sarah made her way to the flight line through the pre-dawn darkness, her steps echoing across the empty tarmac. Her F-22 waited in its hangar like a sleeping predator, its angular surfaces designed to scatter radar waves into harmless fragments. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and his crew had worked through the night to ensure the aircraft was in perfect condition for this critical mission. "Everything checks out perfectly, Captain," Rodriguez reported as Sarah began her pre-flight inspection. "Fuel load is exactly what you requested. Weapons systems are armed and ready. All electronic warfare equipment is operational. She's ready to disappear." Sarah ran her hands along the aircraft's smooth surfaces, feeling for any irregularities that might compromise its stealth characteristics. Every rivet, every panel joint, every antenna had been designed and positioned to minimize radar reflectivity. This technological marvel would be her partner in proving that skill and determination could overcome prejudice and doubt. As she climbed into the cockpit, Sarah felt the familiar sense of connection that came from strapping into an F-22. The aircraft systems came alive around her as she worked through her startup checklist, each switch and control responding exactly as trained. The massive Pratt & Whitney engines spooled up with a sound like controlled thunder, their combined thrust capable of pushing the 30-ton fighter to twice the speed of sound. "Ghost Rider 01, you are cleared for takeoff," came the voice of the tower controller. Sarah could hear the tension in his voice, knowing that everyone on the base was aware of the significance of this mission. "Roger, cleared for takeoff, Ghost Rider 01. Sarah advanced the throttles and felt the F-22 surge forward down the runway. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, climbing into the gray Alaska dawn. As she retracted the landing gear and adjusted her heading toward the first waypoint, Sarah felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was what she had trained for, what she was born to do. The first phase of the mission required her to penetrate simulated enemy airspace, defended by some of the most advanced radar systems in the American inventory. These systems, operated by Air Force specialists who knew exactly what to look for, represented the kind of threats American pilots might face in future conflicts. Sarah's job was to slip through their coverage undetected, proving that the F-22's stealth technology remained effective against improving enemy capabilities. Flying at 30,000 feet, Sarah could see the Alaskan wilderness stretching endlessly in all directions. Snow-covered mountains rose like teeth from the frozen landscape, while rivers wound through valleys like silver threads. It was beautiful and harsh, the kind of environment that had shaped generations of military aviators who trained in these skis. Her first real test came 40 minutes into the mission, as she approached the outer edge of the simulated enemy radar coverage. Sarah could see the electronic warfare signatures on her threat display, multiple radar systems sweeping the sky for any trace of aircraft presence. Normal fighter jets would be detected immediately upon entering this envelope, but the F-22 was anything but normal. Sarah adjusted her altitude and heading to optimize her aircraft's stealth profile, ensuring that she approached the radar sites from angles that minimized her radar cross-section. The F-22's shape was designed to reflect radar waves away from their source, making the aircraft appear no larger than a bird on enemy screens. But this stealth advantage required precise flying and constant attention to positioning. As she penetrated deeper into the defended area, Sarah could see simulated surface-to-air missile sites on her display. These weapons, if real, would be guided by radar systems that were actively searching for her aircraft. Her job was to pass through their coverage zones without triggering any of the automated detection algorithms that would simulate missile launches. The key was patience and precision. Sarah maintained strict altitude and heading discipline, making only gradual course corrections to avoid radar illumination. She had studied the technical specifications of every threat system in the area, learning their detection capabilities and blind spots. Now, she applied that knowledge to thread her way through the defensive network like a needle through fabric. Halfway through the first defended zone, Sarah's threat warning system chirped softly, indicating that an enemy radar had achieved a brief lock on her aircraft. In a real combat situation, this would have triggered missile launches that could prove fatal. In this exercise, it represented a mission failure that would end her evaluation immediately. But the lock lasted only 2 seconds before disappearing, not long enough to constitute a sustained detection. Sarah had momentarily strayed into a radar beam while maneuvering around a simulated missile site, but her quick correction had broken the lock before it could be firmly established. The exercise controllers would debate whether this constituted a mission failure, but Sarah continued with her planned route. 30 minutes later, she cleared the outer defensive zone without triggering any additional alarms. The first phase of Webb's evaluation was complete, and Sarah had demonstrated that she could operate the F-22's stealth systems as effectively as any pilot in the inventory. But this was just the beginning of a 72-hour test that would push her abilities to their absolute limits. Her first target was located in a valley between two mountain ranges, surrounded by simulated air defense sites that created overlapping fields of fire. Sarah would need to descend to low altitude to identify and mark the target, exposing herself to increased radar detection while operating in terrain that limited her escape options. As she approached the target area, Sarah could see the simulated command facility spread across the valley floor. Intelligence reports indicated that this facility coordinated enemy air operations across a 1,000-mile front, making it a high-priority target for American forces. Her job was to confirm the facility's location and configuration, then mark it for precision weapons delivered by follow-on strikes. The descent to low altitude required careful planning to avoid radar detection. Sarah used the mountainous terrain to mask her approach, flying through valleys and behind ridgelines to stay below the radar horizon of the surrounding defense sites. This kind of terrain-following flight demanded constant attention and quick reflexes, as a single navigation error could send her aircraft into a mountainside at 500 miles per hour. At 2,000 feet above ground level, Sarah activated her targeting pod and began searching for the specific structures described in her intelligence briefing. The facility was camouflaged and partially buried, designed to blend into the surrounding landscape and avoid detection from overhead reconnaissance. Sarah had to identify not just the facility's location, but specific buildings within the complex that housed critical command equipment. Using her aircraft's advanced sensors, Sarah methodically cataloged each structure in the facility, comparing what she observed to intelligence photographs taken weeks earlier. Some buildings had been modified or relocated, requiring her to update the targeting data in real time. This kind of detailed reconnaissance work demanded both technical skill and analytical thinking under pressure. As Sarah completed her target assessment, enemy radar systems began actively searching the area where she was operating. The facility's defenders had been alerted to possible reconnaissance activity and were attempting to locate and identify any aircraft in the vicinity. Sarah found herself in a deadly game of electronic hide-and-seek, using every stealth technique she knew to avoid detection. The solution required her to exploit a gap in radar coverage created by the mountainous terrain. Sarah identified a route that would allow her to escape the valley while remaining below the radar horizon of the search systems. This route was longer and more dangerous than a direct departure, requiring her to fly through narrow mountain passes at high speed while maintaining radio silence. As she climbed back to cruising altitude, Sarah transmitted her targeting data to the exercise controllers using encrypted communications that simulated real wartime procedures. Her reconnaissance of the first target was complete, and the information she provided would enable follow-on forces to conduct precision strikes against the facility with minimal collateral damage. But Webb's evaluation was far from over. 2 more targets awaited her, each presenting unique challenges that would test different aspects of her capabilities. The second target required her to locate and track mobile missile launchers that were attempting to avoid detection by constantly changing position. This mission would demand extended loitering in hostile territory while using advanced sensors to penetrate enemy camouflage and deception measures. The third target represented the ultimate test of her skills, a coordinated strike against an enemy airfield timed to coincide with special operations forces on the ground. This mission would require precise timing, perfect communication, and the ability to deliver weapons with surgical accuracy while avoiding civilian casualties. As Sarah set course for the second target area, she reflected on her performance so far. The brief radar lock during her initial penetration might be seen as a failure by some evaluators, but she had recovered quickly and completed her reconnaissance mission successfully. More importantly, she had demonstrated that she could operate the F-22 as effectively as any pilot in the Air Force. But Sarah knew that Colonel Webb would not be satisfied with adequate performance. He had designed this evaluation to push her beyond normal operational limits, hoping to prove his theory that women lacked the physical and mental capabilities required for stealth operations. Sarah's response was to exceed every standard he had established, proving that excellence had no gender. The second target area lay 300 miles to the northeast, across terrain that included both mountains and flat tundra. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy mobile missile launchers were operating somewhere in this region, moving constantly to avoid detection and targeting by American forces. Sarah's job was to locate these missiles and track their movements long enough to enable precision strikes. This mission phase would test her patience and persistence as much as her flying skills. Mobile targets were notoriously difficult to find and track, often hiding in forests or buildings during daylight hours and moving only under cover of darkness. Sarah would need to loiter in the target area for several hours, using her aircraft sensors to search for any signs of missile activity. As she approached the search area, Sarah climbed to maximum altitude to optimize her sensor coverage. From 40,000 feet, her radar and infrared systems could scan hundreds of square miles, looking for the heat signatures and electromagnetic emissions that would reveal hidden missile launchers. But operating at high altitude also made her more vulnerable to enemy surface-to-air missiles with extended range capabilities. The search began as Sarah established a patrol pattern that would allow her to systematically examine the entire target area. Her aircraft's sensors worked continuously, analyzing every heat source and radar return for signs of military activity. Most contacts turned out to be civilian vehicles or natural phenomena, but Sarah had to investigate each one carefully to avoid missing actual threats. 2 hours into her search, Sarah detected what appeared to be a convoy of military vehicles moving along a remote road. Infrared imagery showed several large trucks with heat signatures consistent with mobile missile launchers, exactly what she was looking for. But confirming the identification would require her to descend to lower altitude for visual observation, increasing her risk of detection. Sarah planned her descent carefully, using terrain features to mask her approach while maintaining sensor contact with the suspected missile convoy. As she got closer, high-resolution imagery confirmed her initial assessment. These were definitely mobile ballistic missile launchers attempting to reach new firing positions under cover of daylight movement. The convoy included not just the missile launchers themselves, but support vehicles carrying additional missiles and command equipment. This was a significant target that posed a direct threat to American forces operating in the region. Sarah began tracking the convoy's movement while transmitting targeting data to strike aircraft that were waiting to attack once she confirmed the missile's location. But the convoy commander was experienced in avoiding airstrikes, and the vehicles suddenly scattered as they detected Sarah's aircraft overhead. The missiles dispersed into a heavily forested area where satellite surveillance would have difficulty tracking their individual positions. Sarah found herself trying to maintain contact with multiple moving targets while operating in airspace that limited her maneuvering options. The solution required her to coordinate with other aircraft and ground-based sensors to maintain surveillance coverage of the area where the missiles had dispersed. Sarah served as the on-scene commander for a complex tracking operation that involved multiple platforms and required careful coordination to avoid detection by enemy forces. Over the next 4 hours, Sarah successfully tracked the movement of all 4 missile launchers to their new hiding positions. Her persistence and tactical skill enabled American forces to maintain targeting data on threats that might otherwise have escaped detection. When the exercise concluded this phase, Sarah had demonstrated mastery of one of the most challenging missions in modern air warfare. As she set course for the final target, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction with her performance so far. She had penetrated heavily defended airspace, conducted detailed reconnaissance of a high-value target, and tracked mobile missile launchers across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. Each mission had tested different aspects of her capabilities, and she had excelled in every area. The final phase of Sarah's evaluation began as darkness fell across the Alaskan wilderness. Her third target was an enemy airfield where intelligence reports indicated that advanced fighter aircraft were being prepared for operations against American forces. This mission would require her to coordinate with special operations teams on the ground while conducting precision strikes against specific aircraft without damaging nearby civilian infrastructure. Sarah had been airborne for nearly 60 hours across multiple mission segments, with brief refueling stops but no real rest. The sustained operations were designed to test her ability to maintain peak performance under the physical and mental stress of extended combat missions. Colonel Webb had specifically included this endurance requirement, believing that women would prove unable to sustain the focus and decision-making ability required for prolonged operations. As she approached the target area, Sarah established contact with the special operations team that had infiltrated the airfield perimeter. The team, call sign Reaper 6, consisted of Air Force Special Operations specialists who had spent 3 days moving into position to provide ground-based intelligence and laser targeting for her strike mission. "Ghost Rider, this is Reaper 6, came the whispered voice over her encrypted communication system. "We have eyes on the target. Count 12 enemy aircraft on the ramp, with ground crews conducting pre-flight preparations on at least 6 birds. Looks like they're planning major air operations." Sarah could see the airfield on her infrared display, its runways and taxiways clearly visible despite the darkness. Enemy aircraft were arranged in protective revetments around the field, while fuel trucks and support equipment moved between them. The scene represented exactly the kind of target that American stealth aircraft were designed to neutralize. "Reaper 6, Ghost Rider copies 12 aircraft on deck. Can you identify aircraft types and priority targets?" Sarah requested, knowing that her limited weapons load would require careful target selection. "Ghost Rider, we have positive identification on 6 advanced fighter aircraft in the northern revetment area. These appear to be the primary threats to friendly air operations. Additional aircraft in the southern area are transport and support types, lower priority for engagement." Sarah studied the target layout on her displays, planning her attack approach to maximize effectiveness while minimizing exposure to ground-based defenses. The airfield was protected by multiple surface-to-air missile systems and anti-aircraft artillery, requiring her to time her attack carefully to avoid detection until weapons release. The mission plan called for Sarah to destroy the 6 fighter aircraft while avoiding damage to civilian structures located near the airfield boundary. A school and hospital were positioned within 500 meters of the military installations, requiring precision that would challenge even the most advanced weapons systems. Any mistake could result in civilian casualties that would undermine the strategic objectives of the entire operation. "Reaper 6, I'm beginning my attack run. Maintain laser designation on the first target when I call for illumination." Sarah descended to attack altitude, using terrain masking to approach the airfield from an unexpected direction. The F-22's stealth characteristics would provide some protection from radar detection, but at low altitude, she would be vulnerable to infrared-guided missiles and visual detection by ground observers. Her first target was a fighter aircraft parked in a concrete revetment designed to protect it from attack. Sarah would need to deliver her weapon with sufficient precision to destroy the aircraft while leaving the protective walls intact, preventing debris from damaging nearby civilian structures. This required accuracy measured in feet rather than yards. "Reaper 6, laser on target 1, Sarah called as she lined up for her first attack. "Target illuminated, Ghost Rider. Winds are calm, no atmospheric disturbance." Sarah pressed the weapon release button, sending a precision-guided bomb toward the first enemy fighter. The weapon would guide itself to the exact spot being illuminated by Reaper 6's laser designator, striking with accuracy that would have been impossible just decades earlier. But the technology was only as good as the pilots and ground controllers who employed it. "Direct hit, target destroyed," reported Reaper 6. "Enemy fighters are beginning to taxi for emergency takeoff. You need to expedite follow-on attacks." The destruction of the first aircraft had alerted the airfield defenders to her presence. Enemy pilots were scrambling to get their aircraft airborne before they could be destroyed on the ground, while surface-to-air missile crews searched the skies for signs of additional attackers. Sarah found herself in a race against time to destroy the remaining targets before they could escape. Her second attack required a different approach angle to reach a target in the southern revetment area. This meant exposing herself to a surface-to-air missile site that had been repositioned since her intelligence briefing, forcing her to improvise new tactics while under increasing pressure from enemy defenses. "Missile launch bearing 270, called Reaper 6. "Sam in the air, Ghost Rider." Sarah immediately began evasive maneuvers, using the F-22's exceptional agility to avoid the incoming missile while maintaining her attack profile. The surface-to-air missile streaked past her aircraft, its proximity close enough to trigger her threat warning systems, but not close enough to cause damage. She continued her attack run without hesitation. Reaper 6, laser on target 2. Target illuminated. Sam's sight is reloading, estimate 60 seconds to next launch. Sarah released her second weapon and immediately began maneuvering to avoid the next missile launch. This constant threat from ground defenses added enormous complexity to her mission, requiring her to balance offensive effectiveness against defensive survival. Every second she remained in the target area increased her risk of being shot down. The third and fourth targets required her to attack from a completely different direction, forcing her to fly directly over the civilian areas she was trying to protect. This approach would minimize her exposure to the remaining surface-to-air missile sites, but any navigation error could result in weapons falling on non-military targets. Ghost Rider, be advised, enemy fighters are airborne, reported Reaper 6. 2 aircraft departing to the east, estimated altitude climbing through 5,000 feet. This development fundamentally changed Sarah's tactical situation. Enemy fighters in the air posed a direct threat to her aircraft, while also complicating her ability to complete the remaining ground attacks. She had to decide whether to abandon her mission to engage the airborne threats or continue with her planned strikes against ground targets. Sarah chose to continue her ground attack mission, reasoning that destroying the remaining aircraft on the ground was more important than engaging those that had already escaped. This decision required her to accept increased risk from the airborne fighters while trusting that her stealth characteristics would prevent detection until she could complete her mission. Her third weapon found its target with the same precision as the first two, destroying another enemy fighter in a spectacular explosion that illuminated the entire airfield. The psychological impact on enemy ground crews was immediately apparent as personnel began taking cover rather than continuing their aircraft preparation activities. "Outstanding work, Ghost Rider," came the voice of Reaper 6. "Target 3 destroyed, 3 targets remaining. Enemy fighters are circling at 15,000 feet. Appears they cannot locate your position." The enemy pilots were searching for an aircraft they could not see on radar, forcing them to rely on visual detection in darkness, while Sarah maintained the initiative through superior technology and tactics. This demonstrated the fundamental advantage of stealth aircraft in modern air warfare, the ability to attack without being effectively countered. Sarah's fourth attack encountered unexpected resistance when anti-aircraft artillery began firing in her general direction. While the gunners could not see her aircraft, they were attempting to create a barrier of exploding shells that might damage her by chance. This barrage forced her to modify her attack approach while maintaining precision targeting. Reaper 6, heavy flak over the target area. Can you provide alternate laser designation from a different angle? Negative, Ghost Rider. Current position is our only line of sight to the target. You'll need to thread the needle. Sarah calculated the timing of the anti-aircraft fire, identifying brief windows when the barrage pattern created gaps she could exploit. Flying through exploding artillery shells required precise timing and nerves of steel, but the alternative was abandoning targets that posed direct threats to American forces. Her fourth weapon release came during a lull in the artillery fire, with the precision-guided bomb striking its target exactly as planned. The destruction of another fighter aircraft triggered increased enemy activity across the airfield, with searchlights beginning to sweep the sky in desperate attempts to locate her aircraft. "Target 4 destroyed," reported Reaper 6. 2 fighters remaining, but they're beginning to disperse to alternate locations. If you're going to get them, it needs to be now. Sarah's final 2 weapons would complete her mission, but delivering them would require her to remain in increasingly dangerous airspace, while enemy defenses concentrated their efforts on finding and destroying her aircraft. The enemy fighters overhead were beginning to coordinate their search pattern, while ground-based missile crews adjusted their tactics based on her previous attack approaches. The 5th target was positioned near the main terminal building, requiring extreme precision to avoid collateral damage to civilian areas. Sarah approached from a direction that would keep her weapons clear of non-military structures, but this route exposed her to a surface-to-air missile site that had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. "Missile launch, multiple missiles in the air," called Reaper 6. "At least 3 SAMs tracking your position." Sarah found herself defending against multiple missile threats while attempting to complete her attack on the 5th target. The F-22's defensive systems worked automatically to deploy countermeasures and provide threat warnings, but ultimately her survival depended on superior flying skills and tactical decision-making. She released her fifth weapon while simultaneously executing evasive maneuvers designed to defeat the incoming missiles. Two of the three missiles were successfully decoyed by her aircraft's countermeasures, while the third missed due to her aggressive maneuvering. Her weapon struck the fifth target precisely as planned, destroying another enemy fighter in the process. "Direct hit, target 5 destroyed," reported Reaper 6. "Final target is moving toward the runway, appears they're attempting emergency takeoff." Sarah's last weapon would need to strike a moving target as the enemy pilot attempted to get his aircraft airborne. This required her to calculate lead angles and timing while operating in airspace that was now thoroughly alerted to her presence. Every enemy system on the airfield was actively searching for her position. The final attack required split-second timing as Sarah approached the runway where the enemy fighter was beginning its takeoff roll. She had one weapon remaining and one opportunity to prevent this aircraft from joining the others in searching for her position. Missing this target would leave an enemy fighter free to threaten other American aircraft in the area. "Reaper 6, final target is rolling. I need immediate laser designation on the moving aircraft." Tracking the target, laser will be on as soon as he clears the terminal building. Sarah watched the enemy fighter accelerate down the runway, its pilot desperately trying to reach takeoff speed before her weapon could reach him. The race between her precision-guided bomb and his escape attempt would be decided by margins measured in seconds. Target illuminated, Ghost Rider, weapon away. Sarah released her final weapon and immediately began evasive maneuvers to escape the target area before additional surface-to-air missiles could engage her aircraft. Behind her, the precision-guided bomb tracked toward the accelerating enemy fighter, guided by laser designation from Reaper 6's ground position. The explosion occurred just as the enemy aircraft reached rotation speed, destroying the fighter in a massive fireball that marked the end of Sarah's ground attack mission. All 6 target aircraft had been neutralized without causing collateral damage to civilian structures, achieving every objective specified in her mission briefing. "All targets destroyed, excellent work, Ghost Rider," reported Reaper 6. "Recommend immediate departure, enemy reinforcements inbound from adjacent bases." Sarah climbed rapidly away from the target area, using her aircraft's stealth characteristics to disappear from enemy sensors as quickly as she had appeared. The mission phase was complete, but her evaluation was not over. She still needed to navigate hundreds of miles of hostile territory to reach her recovery airfield while avoiding the enemy fighters that were now actively searching for her aircraft. The flight home required different skills than the attack mission. Sarah needed to manage her fuel consumption carefully while avoiding detection by an enemy air defense network that was now fully alert to American stealth operations. Her route planning had to account for increased enemy patrols and modified radar search patterns designed to counter stealth aircraft. As she crossed back into friendly airspace after 48 hours of continuous operations, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had completed every aspect of Webb's evaluation successfully, demonstrating mastery of the F-22's capabilities while operating under conditions that would challenge any pilot regardless of gender. The landing at Elmendorf came as the sun rose over the Alaskan mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and pink. Sarah's aircraft touched down smoothly on the familiar runway where her evaluation had begun 3 days earlier. As she taxied toward the hangar, she could see the crowd of observers waiting to debrief her performance. General Hayes was the first to approach as Sarah climbed out of her aircraft. The 3-star general's expression was unreadable, giving no indication of how the evaluation panel had assessed Sarah's performance. Behind her stood Colonel Webb, whose own expression seemed to reflect internal conflict about what he had witnessed. "Captain Martinez," General Hayes said formally, "you are directed to report for immediate debrief with the evaluation panel. Your aircraft will be secured pending technical analysis of mission data." Sarah snapped to attention, knowing that the next few hours would determine not just her future, but potentially the future of women in stealth operations. The flying was complete, but the evaluation process would continue until every aspect of her performance had been analyzed and documented. As she walked toward the debrief facility, Sarah reflected on the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. In 72 hours of continuous operations, She had proven that skill and determination could overcome any prejudice or preconception. The F-22 had performed exactly as designed, but more importantly, so had she. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez fell into step beside her as they approached the hangar. "Outstanding flying, Captain," he said quietly. "That was some of the finest stealth operations I've ever witnessed." Sarah nodded her thanks, but remained focused on the challenges ahead. The debriefing process would be exhaustive, with every decision and action subjected to detailed analysis. Colonel Webb would have final input on her evaluation, and she knew he would scrutinize every aspect of her performance looking for evidence to support his preconceptions. The evaluation was over, but the judgment was just beginning. The debriefing room at Elmendorf Air Force Base buzzed with quiet tension as Sarah faced a panel of 12 senior officers representing every major command in the Air Force. Each officer had spent the past 72 hours monitoring different aspects of her performance, from basic flying skills to complex tactical decision-making under extreme pressure. Their collective assessment would determine not only her future as an F-22 pilot, but the broader question of women's roles in stealth operations. General Hayes presided over the panel from the center seat, flanked by representatives from Air Combat Command, Pacific Air Forces, Air Force Special Operations Command, and the Pentagon. To her right sat Colonel Webb, whose expression remained carefully neutral despite having designed an evaluation that many observers considered impossible to pass. The presence of so many senior officials underscored the far-reaching implications of Sarah's performance. "Captain Martinez," General Hayes began formally, "this debriefing will examine every aspect of your performance during Operation Arctic Thunder. Each panel member will address specific areas of evaluation, and you will have the opportunity to provide input and clarification as needed. Do you understand the process?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, maintaining perfect military bearing despite her exhaustion from 72 hours of continuous operations. She had managed only brief naps during refueling stops, and her body was running on adrenaline and determination alone. "Very well. We'll begin with basic aircraft handling and systems management." Lieutenant Colonel James Park from Air Education and Training Command opened his evaluation folder. As the officer responsible for F-22 pilot training standards, his assessment would carry significant weight with the panel. Captain Martinez demonstrated exceptional aircraft handling throughout all phases of the evaluation. Her systems management was flawless, with zero discrepancies noted during any mission segment. Navigation accuracy exceeded standard requirements by significant margins. Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The technical aspects of flying had never been her primary concern, but positive feedback from the training command validated her fundamental qualifications as an F-22 pilot. "However," Colonel Park continued, "I noted several instances where Captain Martinez deviated from standard procedures to develop innovative solutions to tactical problems. While these innovations proved effective, they raise questions about adherence to established protocols." Sarah recognized this as a potential criticism wrapped in neutral language. Her ability to adapt and improvise had been essential to mission success, but some evaluators might view innovation as a weakness rather than a strength. She waited to see how the panel would interpret this observation. Brigadier General Susan Crawford from Pacific Air Forces addressed the stealth operations aspects of Sarah's performance. "Captain Martinez demonstrated mastery of low observable operations that equals or exceeds that of any pilot in our inventory. Her penetration of defended airspace was executed with textbook precision, maintaining stealth characteristics while accomplishing complex mission objectives." This assessment was particularly significant coming from General Crawford, who commanded F-22 operations across the Pacific Theater. Her endorsement carried enormous weight within the stealth fighter community and represented validation of Sarah's core capabilities. "The brief radar lock during initial penetration," General Crawford continued, "was well within acceptable parameters for this type of operation. Captain Martinez's recovery was immediate and effective, demonstrating proper training and sound judgment under pressure." Sarah felt relief wash over her as the general addressed what she had feared might be seen as a mission failure. The 2-second radar lock had been the result of aggressive maneuvering in complex terrain, not pilot error or inadequate stealth procedures. Colonel Margaret Thompson from Air Force Special Operations Command focused on Sarah's coordination with ground forces. The integration between Ghost Rider and Reaper 6 was exceptional throughout the final mission phase. Captain Martinez demonstrated complete understanding of joint operations procedures while maintaining operational security in a complex tactical environment. This feedback addressed one of the most challenging aspects of modern air operations: the need to coordinate with multiple forces while operating independently behind enemy lines. Sarah's ability to work seamlessly with special operations teams validated her training in joint warfare concepts. Her weapon delivery accuracy was outstanding, Colonel Thompson continued. 6 targets engaged, 6 targets destroyed, with 0 collateral damage despite extremely restrictive rules of engagement. This level of precision under combat stress is remarkable for any pilot, regardless of experience level. The weapons delivery phase had been the most stressful part of Sarah's evaluation, requiring her to balance offensive effectiveness against defensive survival while protecting civilian areas. Positive feedback in this area addressed one of Colonel Webb's key concerns about women's ability to perform under extreme pressure. Major General Robert Chen from Air Combat Command addressed the tactical decision-making aspects of the evaluation. Captain Martinez consistently made sound tactical decisions throughout all mission phases. Her ability to adapt to changing threat environments while maintaining mission focus demonstrated exceptional situational awareness and judgment. Sarah knew that this assessment was crucial, as tactical decision-making represented the difference between experienced pilots and truly exceptional ones. The ability to process complex information quickly and make correct decisions under pressure could not be taught directly. It required natural aptitude combined with extensive experience. I was particularly impressed, General Chen continued, by her decision to continue ground attacks despite airborne threats. This showed proper understanding of mission priorities and demonstrated courage under fire that would be commendable in any combat veteran. The decision to continue attacking ground targets while enemy fighters searched overhead had been one of Sarah's most difficult choices during the evaluation. She had calculated that destroying aircraft on the ground was more valuable than engaging those already airborne, but the decision had required her to accept significant personal risk. Colonel David Rodriguez from the Pentagon addressed the broader implications of Sarah's performance. This evaluation was designed to assess not just individual pilot capability, but the broader question of women's integration into stealth operations. Captain Martinez's performance provides clear evidence that gender is not a limiting factor in these highly demanding missions. This statement went directly to the heart of the controversy that had prompted Sarah's evaluation. Colonel Webb's skepticism about women in stealth operations had been based on assumptions about physical and mental limitations that Sarah's performance had effectively disproven. The data from this evaluation, Colonel Rodriguez continued, will inform policy decisions about female integration in special access programs and other highly classified operations. Captain Martinez has opened doors that may benefit women throughout the military. Sarah understood that her performance carried implications far beyond her individual career. Other women would benefit from the precedent she had established, but they would also face the burden of maintaining standards she had set through her exceptional performance. Finally, Colonel Webb addressed the panel. His assessment would be crucial, as he had designed the evaluation and represented the skeptical viewpoint that Sarah's performance was intended to address. Captain Martinez completed all assigned missions within acceptable parameters, he began carefully. Sarah noted the formal language, recognizing that Webb was acknowledging her success while avoiding enthusiastic endorsement. This measured response was actually more valuable than effusive praise, as it represented admission from her harshest critic that she had met his standards. Her performance during the mobile target phase was particularly noteworthy, Webb continued. Tracking and engaging mobile missile launchers requires patience and persistence that many experienced pilots struggle to maintain. Captain Martinez demonstrated both qualities throughout extended operations in hostile territory. This acknowledgement was significant because mobile target operations had been specifically included to test women's supposed lack of patience for extended missions. Sarah's success in this area directly contradicted one of Webb's primary concerns about female pilots. However, Webb added, this evaluation was conducted under controlled training conditions that may not fully replicate the stress and uncertainty of actual combat operations. While Captain Martinez's performance was exemplary, questions remain about long-term sustainability under operational conditions. Sarah recognized this as Webb's attempt to qualify his positive assessment without directly contradicting the evidence of her performance. He was acknowledging her success while maintaining that real combat might present different challenges. General Hayes called for a brief recess to allow the panel to deliberate privately. Sarah was escorted to a waiting area where she found Major Patterson and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez waiting to provide moral support. The informal feedback from her colleagues was uniformly positive, but she knew that official assessment might be influenced by political considerations beyond pure performance evaluation. "How do you think it went?" Patterson asked quietly. "Better than I hoped," Sarah admitted. "Even Webb acknowledged that I met the mission requirements. That's more than I expected from him." "You did more than meet requirements," Rodriguez interjected. "You set new standards for stealth operations. I've worked with F-22 pilots for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone handle that kind of mission pressure with such consistency." When the panel reconvened, General Hayes announced their findings. The evaluation panel has reached unanimous agreement on Captain Martinez's performance assessment. Her demonstration of stealth operations capability was exceptional by any standard, and her tactical decision-making was consistently sound throughout all mission phases. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she awaited the panel's final verdict. Everything she had worked for, everything she believed about her own capabilities, would be validated or dismissed by their next words. "Captain Martinez is hereby certified for full operational status in F-22 stealth operations," General Hayes announced. "She will be assigned to the 94th Fighter Squadron's Special Operations Flight, where she will participate in the Air Force's most sensitive missions." The room erupted in quiet applause from the observers who had gathered to witness this historic moment. Sarah maintained her military bearing while internally celebrating a victory that represented far more than personal achievement. She had proven that excellence transcended gender, that determination and skill could overcome any prejudice. "Furthermore," General Hayes continued, "Captain Martinez's evaluation performance will serve as the baseline standard for all future stealth operations assessments, regardless of the pilot's gender or background. Her demonstrated capabilities establish the benchmark that all pilots must meet to qualify for these missions." This announcement was even more significant than Sarah's individual certification. By making her performance the standard for all future pilots, the Air Force was acknowledging that she had not just met expectations, but exceeded them by margins that redefined what was possible. Colonel Webb approached Sarah after the formal announcement concluded. His expression was thoughtful rather than hostile, suggesting that her performance had genuinely changed his perspective on women's capabilities in combat aviation. "Captain Martinez," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. My skepticism was based on assumptions that your performance has proven incorrect. You have demonstrated capabilities that would be exceptional for any pilot, and I was wrong to question your suitability for stealth operations based on gender." Sarah appreciated Webb's honesty, recognizing how difficult it must have been for him to publicly acknowledge his error. "Sir, I understand your concerns were based on genuine questions about operational effectiveness. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address those questions definitively." "Your performance has changed my perspective permanently," Webb replied. "I will be recommending immediate implementation of gender-neutral standards for all special operations programs. If other women can meet the standards you've established, they deserve the same opportunities." As the formal debriefing concluded, Sarah was approached by General Crawford with news of her next assignment. The 94th Fighter Squadron's Special Operations Flight was responsible for the Air Force's most classified missions, including deep penetration reconnaissance and precision strikes in denied territory. Assignment to this unit represented the pinnacle of fighter pilot careers. "Your first operational mission is scheduled for next month," General Crawford explained. "You'll be working with Joint Special Operations Forces on a classified operation that will put your demonstrated skills to immediate use. Are you ready for that level of responsibility?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied without hesitation. "I'm ready for whatever mission the Air Force assigns." As she walked out of the debriefing facility, Sarah reflected on the magnitude of what had just occurred. 3 days earlier, she had been a pilot struggling to prove her worth to skeptical colleagues. Now she was certified for the most demanding missions in military aviation, with her performance serving as the standard for all future pilots. The victory belonged not just to her, but to every woman who had faced similar doubts about their capabilities. Sarah had proven that determination, skill, and preparation could overcome any obstacle, that excellence was limited only by individual commitment to achieving it. More importantly, she had opened a door that could never be closed again. Other women would follow in her footsteps, but they would do so knowing that the path was possible, that the barriers were artificial rather than fundamental. The F-22 community would be stronger for their contributions, and American national security would benefit from the talents of every qualified pilot regardless of gender. As Sarah prepared for her new assignment, she looked forward to the challenges ahead with confidence earned through proven performance. The arguments about women's suitability for stealth operations had been settled definitively, not through legislation or policy directives, but through demonstrated excellence that spoke louder than any words. The Ghost had proven herself real, substantial, and utterly unstoppable. 6 months after her evaluation triumph, Captain Sarah, Ghost, Martinez found herself preparing for a mission that would have been unthinkable before her groundbreaking performance during Operation Arctic Thunder. The briefing room at a classified location housed representatives from multiple intelligence agencies, special operations commands, and allied nations. Her presence at this table represented not just personal achievement, but a fundamental shift in how the military viewed women's capabilities in the most demanding operational roles. The mission, codenamed Operation Silent Echo, involved penetrating deep into hostile territory to conduct reconnaissance and precision strikes against a network of enemy facilities that threatened regional stability. Sarah would be flying solo, operating hundreds of miles behind enemy lines with minimal support and no possibility of rescue if things went wrong. This was exactly the kind of mission that Colonel Webb had insisted women could never handle. "Ghost, you'll be our primary reconnaissance asset for the entire operation," explained Colonel Jennifer Parks, the mission commander from Joint Special Operations Command. "Your success or failure will determine whether follow-on forces can proceed with their objectives. There's no backup plan if you can't complete your assignments." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility being placed on her shoulders. Since her evaluation success, she had flown 14 operational missions, each one building her reputation as one of the most capable stealth pilots in the Air Force. Her call sign, Ghost, had taken on new meaning throughout the special operations community, where her ability to appear and disappear without warning had become legendary. "The primary target is a command facility located in the Zagros Mountains," Colonel Parks continued, indicating a remote location on the digital map display. "Intelligence indicates this facility coordinates enemy operations across a 1,000-mile front. Neutralizing it could significantly degrade their operational capabilities." The target area was protected by some of the most advanced air defense systems available to enemy forces. Multiple layers of radar coverage, sophisticated electronic warfare equipment, and mobile missile launchers created an integrated defense network that would challenge even the F-22's stealth capabilities. Success would require not just technical excellence, but innovative thinking and split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. Secondary targets include 3 weapons storage facilities and a communications hub that coordinates with sleeper cells in allied nations, Parks added. "Each target presents unique challenges, and you'll need to adapt your approach based on real-time intelligence updates." Sarah studied the mission parameters carefully, noting the extended duration and complex routing required to reach all targets while avoiding detection. The flight would cover over 1,500 miles of hostile territory, requiring multiple aerial refueling operations and careful fuel management throughout the mission. "What about enemy air assets?" Sarah asked, knowing that air-to-air threats could complicate her mission significantly. "Intelligence reports indicate at least 2 squadrons of advanced fighters based at airfields within range of your target areas," replied Major Lisa Chen from the Defense Intelligence Agency. "These aircraft are equipped with look-down radar systems specifically designed to counter stealth technology." This information added another layer of complexity to an already challenging mission. Sarah would need to avoid not just surface-based threats, but airborne opponents who were actively searching for aircraft like hers. The F-22's stealth characteristics provided significant advantages, but they were not absolute protection against determined and well-equipped enemies. Time on target for the primary objective is 300 local time, Colonel Parks announced. This timing is critical for coordination with other operation elements. Any delay could compromise the entire mission sequence. Sarah calculated the flight time required to reach the target area, factoring in the circuitous route needed to avoid the heaviest concentrations of enemy defenses. She would need to depart from her forward operating base before sunset to arrive at the target during the optimal attack window. Understood, ma'am. I'll be on target at 300. The mission briefing continued for 3 hours, covering every aspect of the operation from weather conditions to escape and evasion procedures if her aircraft was shot down. Sarah absorbed every detail, knowing that thorough preparation was the foundation of successful stealth operations. As the briefing concluded, Sarah was approached by General Hayes, who had flown in personally to oversee this critical mission. The three-star general's presence underscored the strategic importance of Operation Silent Echo and the confidence the Air Force had developed in Sarah's capabilities. "Captain Martinez," General Hayes said quietly, "this mission represents everything we hope to achieve when we opened stealth operations to women. Your performance will be watched closely by our allies and our enemies alike." "I understand the significance, ma'am," Sarah replied. "I won't let down the Air Force or the women who will follow in my footsteps." "I know you won't. Your track record speaks for itself. But I want you to know that you're not carrying this burden alone. The entire Special Operations community is behind you." That evening, Sarah conducted her final mission preparations in the secure maintenance hangar where her F-22 waited. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez supervised the weapons loading and systems checks with his characteristic attention to detail. The aircraft had been modified with additional electronic warfare equipment and extended-range fuel tanks for this special mission. "Everything checks out perfectly, Captain," Rodriguez reported. "Stealth coatings are pristine, all systems are operating within normal parameters, and your weapons load is exactly as specified. She's ready to disappear." Sarah walked around her aircraft one final time, checking every surface for any irregularities that might compromise its stealth characteristics. The F-22 represented the pinnacle of American aerospace technology, but ultimately its effectiveness depended on the pilot's skill and judgment. "Rodriguez," Sarah said as she completed her inspection, "when I get back from this mission, I want you to know that your support has been essential to every success I've achieved. You're the best crew chief in the Air Force." "Thank you, Captain. Just bring yourself and my airplane home safely. That's all the thanks I need." Sarah climbed into the cockpit as the sun set behind the mountains surrounding the classified airbase. The familiar ritual of startup and pre-flight checks helped calm her nerves and focus her mind on the challenges ahead. In 6 hours, she would be operating deep behind enemy lines with no support except her own training and determination. The takeoff occurred under cover of darkness, with Sarah's aircraft climbing rapidly to cruising altitude while maintaining strict radio silence. Navigation would be conducted entirely through GPS and inertial systems, with no external communication allowed until after target engagement. She was truly on her own. The flight to the target area took her across varied terrain, from desert landscapes to mountain ranges that rose over 15,000 feet above sea level. Sarah used this terrain to mask her approach, flying through valleys and behind ridgelines to avoid radar detection. The F-22's terrain-following capabilities allowed her to maintain very low altitude while navigating safely through challenging geography. 3 hours into the mission, Sarah encountered her first serious threat when enemy radar systems began actively searching the area where she was operating. The threat warning displays in her cockpit showed multiple radar signatures attempting to locate and track her aircraft. She adjusted her heading and altitude to optimize her stealth profile while continuing toward the target. "Ghost, this is Overwatch," came a voice over her secure communication system. "Enemy air activity detected in your operating area. 2 fighters conducting combat air patrol approximately 50 miles north of your position." Sarah acknowledged the warning while calculating the implications for her mission timing. The presence of enemy fighters meant that she would need to be even more careful about maintaining stealth discipline while operating in the target area. Any detection could result in immediate engagement by aircraft specifically equipped to counter stealth technology. As she approached the primary target area, Sarah could see the enemy command facility on her infrared display. The complex was carved into a mountainside and heavily camouflaged to avoid detection by satellite reconnaissance. Multiple buildings were connected by underground tunnels, creating a hardened facility that could survive conventional bombing attacks. The facility was protected by an integrated air defense network that included both radar-guided and infrared-guided surface-to-air missiles. These systems were positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that would challenge any attacking aircraft. Sarah's job was to find gaps in this coverage and exploit them to deliver precision weapons against specific targets within the complex. She began her attack by targeting the facility's primary communications antenna, a dish located on the highest peak of the mountain complex. Destroying this antenna would isolate the command center from its subordinate units and prevent coordination of enemy responses to the broader operation. Sarah lined up her first weapon delivery, using GPS coordinates provided by special operations teams that had infiltrated the area weeks earlier. The precision-guided munition would strike within feet of its intended target, ensuring maximum damage to the communications equipment while minimizing collateral effects on nearby structures. The first explosion illuminated the mountainside as the communications antenna disappeared in a ball of flame and debris. Enemy personnel began scrambling to activate backup systems, while air defense crews searched the skies for signs of attacking aircraft. Sarah had achieved tactical surprise, but maintaining it would require immediate follow-on attacks before defenses could fully react. Her second target was the facility's power generation plant, located in a reinforced bunker beneath the main command building. Destroying this target would force the facility to operate on backup power, significantly reducing its operational capabilities. The precision required for this attack was extreme, as the target was located beneath several layers of concrete and steel. Sarah's weapon penetrated the bunker's roof exactly as planned, the delayed fuse warhead exploding deep within the power plant and causing secondary explosions that could be seen from miles away. The loss of primary power triggered emergency lighting throughout the complex while disabling many of the facility's electronic systems. The third target presented the greatest challenge, a computer center that housed the facility,